If you squeeze the entire history of life on Earth into a single 24-hour day, modern humans, us, Homo sapiens, would show up in the last 8 seconds before midnight. That's it. Those 8 seconds represent our whole 350,000-year run. We are, in the grand scheme, brand new. And yet, even in that sliver of time, the world has shifted. Not beyond recognition, but enough that if you could be dropped back to the very moment our species first appeared, you'd see some genuinely strange things staring back at you. So let's actually do that. Let's go back and look at the world through the eyes of the first humans and meet the animals they saw that no longer walk the earth. The first thing to get straight is where. For most of our early history, Homo sapiens stayed put, confined to continental Africa, and didn't really spread out until the Great Dispersal around 70,000 years ago, the one whose descendants went on to populate the planet. And that matters because it means the first humans never saw the animals we tend to picture when we think Ice Age. No woolly mammoths, no Smilodon. Those icons lived in the rest of the world, or had vanished from Africa long before we arrived. Africa was on its own path, and the extinct animals there followed a peculiar theme. They looked a lot like the animals we still have today, just slightly off. Familiar, but wrong. And that's what makes this world so uncanny. Take the Palaeoloxodon. From a distance, it looked like an ordinary elephant, aside from some odd bony growths on top of its skull. But walk up close and the proportions would hit you, because this was a giant. Palaeoloxodon is currently considered to contain the largest land mammals that ever lived. And here's the wonderful contradiction. It also contains the smallest elephants that ever lived. How? Because it was a whole genus of species that varied enormously, from titanic mainland giants to dwarf elephants that shrank down on Mediterranean islands. Most were gone by the late Pleistocene, and the giants mostly lived outside Africa, which left the first humans with one African representative. And it was no runt. Its likely ancestor, Palaeoloxodon reki, stood around 4 meters at the shoulder and weighed something like 13 tons, heavier than any theropod dinosaur that ever lived, and far bigger than the largest African bush elephant today. And that scale extended to the tusks. Palaeoloxodon had one of the longest tusk-to-body ratios of any elephant known. Tusks as long as the entire bodies of some smaller elephant species, and unusually straight, sweeping close to the ground. Those bony bumps on the skull? They're thought to have anchored huge muscles for swinging that massive head and its tusks with real force. Now, you'd think no sane creature would pick a fight with a supercharged 13-ton elephant. And yet, researchers suspect the first humans may have hunted them. There's no smoking gun in Africa, but we know other human species in Eurasia habitually hunted and butchered Palaeoloxodon of similar size, using spears. And by this point, we had javelins too. If it happened, it certainly wasn't a casual affair. Taking on the largest animal on the continent carried enormous risk, and there were plenty of smaller, less armed options around. Though smaller never meant easy. Case in point, Syncerus antiquus, the giant buffalo, the largest bovid ever to live in Africa. Adults ran about 3 meters long and stood taller at the shoulder than most moose, roped in dense muscle and heavy bone, with big males hitting well over 2 tons, the weight of a white rhino. But a rhino carries a lot of that weight in thick armored hide. The giant buffalo was pure muscle, bone and horn. And what horns! Each one swept out to the side, curved and enormously long. And in the largest individuals, the spread from tip to tip may have reached around 3 meters, longer than the horns of most horned dinosaurs, some of them 3 times its size. And we know exactly how it used them, because our ancestors drew it. The giant buffalo shows up again and again in African cave art, and it's usually depicted mid-fight, head down, horns lowered, ramming a rival. In fact, it holds the record for the most depictions of violence in African rock art, which strongly implies it had a short fuse. Pair that temper with an estimated top speed around 35 miles an hour, and anything it decided to charge, short of a Palaeoloxodon, was going to have a very bad day. And still, that didn't stop us from hunting it. Nor did it stop the other us. Because here's the part people forget. Human evolution wasn't a tidy ladder, one species neatly replacing the last. It was messy, with a surprising amount of overlap. And that overlap peaked right around our origin. Roughly 300,000 years ago, there were as many as 4 Homo species living in Africa at the same time. Not necessarily side by side, but close enough that we might have encountered each of them. Alongside us, there were more archaic humans, and while they all shared a family resemblance, some would have looked distinctly not like us. The strangest was a small, primitive species with a surprisingly ape-like build. Bodies suited more to climbing trees than running efficiently across open ground. Small in stature, with small brains, and, so far, no material culture assigned to them at all. Their teeth are typically worn and eroded, suggesting a diet of gritty food picked up off the ground. To a modern human, these would have read as clearly, obviously different. The line got blurrier with the others. Larger-brained, more advanced archaic humans, comparable to us in height and brain size, but built along more Neanderthal-like lines. Broad chests, robust frames, likely stronger and more durable than we were. In a straight scrap, I know who I'd bet on. And they weren't primitive at all. Their remains come with fire, tools, spears, primitive shelters, even art. They were skilled big game hunters, and their range and diet overlapped with ours, which raises the possibility of real contact, competition, maybe conflict. But here's a lovely twist. Studies of their hyoid bone and inner ear suggest they may have been capable of human-like speech. So it's entirely possible that when our ancestors met these other humans, some encounters were settled not with weapons, but with words. There's even a contested study suggesting we interbred with some of them, and a fringe view that they were our direct ancestors, though that's drawn heavy pushback. Either way, it's one of the great fog-shrouded mysteries of our origins. And speaking of things you'd rather not meet, there was Dinopithecus. The name literally means terrible ape, and it was essentially a nightmare baboon. Larger than the average man, some individuals hitting around 170 pounds, packed with muscle and armed with canines about 20% bigger than the largest baboons alive today. It roamed the ground like a baboon rather than swinging through trees, which would have made run-ins with early humans more likely, if their timelines actually overlapped, which we're honestly not sure about. And unlike most baboons, it seems to have been an opportunistic feeder that ate more meat than nearly any primate before it. Some have speculated that smaller, earlier human species may occasionally have been on its menu. The only comfort is that our size and technology probably kept us off it. Now, not everything strange was dangerous. Meet Rusingoryx, nicknamed the dinosaur wildebeest. At a glance, it just looked like a wildebeest with an oddly long, thick neck. You wouldn't have clocked what was truly bizarre about it with your eyes. You'd have needed your ears. Because inside its skull, Rusingoryx had a large, hollow, trumpet-like nasal crest, a structure found in no other mammal and eerily similar to the crests of hadrosaur dinosaurs. Researchers think it evolved this instrument convergently for the same reason the hadrosaurs did. Both lived in big herds in open country where broadcasting sound was useful. And it could apparently pitch its calls so low they dipped into infrasound, frequencies too deep for human ears. So two of these animals could be having a full volume shouting match right next to you and you'd hear nothing. And Rusingoryx has the grim distinction of being the one animal on this list with hard skeletal proof that we hunted it. A mass of them found in Kenya bearing butchery marks, right beside human tools in a way that suggests a coordinated mass kill. Some even think we drove it extinct. There's more. Metridiochorus, a warthog so compact it could weigh over twice what a modern warthog of the same length does, some big ones estimated past half a ton. A horse-sized warthog with 4 long, straight tusks and very likely the same testy temperament. There were rhinos, zebras and giraffes too, including a zebra in what's now the Sahara, a giraffe slightly taller than today's, and, most strikingly, a hairy rhinoceros. Stephanorhinus, the steppe rhino, lived in northern Africa over 200,000 years ago and preferred slightly colder ground, which gave it a sparse, hairy coat that made it look like a smaller, woolly rhino. We have stone tools associated with hunting it dating back around 250,000 years, and, if it's the same animal Neanderthals prized elsewhere, its skull was occasionally kept as a hunting trophy. So here's the quiet punchline to all of this. Yes, many of these animals went extinct in Africa, but here's the remarkable thing. Africa held on to far more of its megafauna than any other continent. Elsewhere, when humans arrived, the giants vanished. In Africa, where animals had co-evolved alongside us for millions of years and learned to fear us, most of the big, strange creatures survived. Which is exactly why the first humans didn't see a world completely full of alien monsters. Because the weirdest African animals of all aren't extinct at all. They're still here. Elephants, rhinos, giraffes, hippos. And let's do our very best to keep it that way. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep looking up.